Test, test. Hello. Okay. It is 10 past 11 AM London time. I am just going to see where the stream takes me. I've got a couple ideas, GJ, GU, just the regular pairs that I'm trading. Absent of gold, I think. I'll cover them and then see where it leads. What's good, bro? The sound is all good then, yeah. Okay. First thing I'm looking at is GBPJPY. Let's consider the context. Okay. The start of April was generally bearish, had a big move to the downside, and now we are making big retracement of that move on a larger scale. If, as you can see, this area here that I've not got plotted out, but that's capped at 194.600 down to 193.850 is an area of interest for us. Okay, that rests directly above the previous highs, the highs from last week. So if I were to just come up to, let's say, a H4 4-hour, the region I'm speaking about is the one up here. This region up here on a 4-hour, on a daily perspective, is an area of interest, and it rests directly above last week's highs, so we know there's an area of gravitation. The market generally is going to be pulled to this direction just for the fill of the imbalance to resume equilibrium. Furthermore, we have the previous week's highs up here, which means stop losses from the previous week's sellers are resting above this zone too. Multiple factors of confluence, so I just wanted to keep that in mind, that higher time frame context. As you can see on this lower time frame, the hourly, I've got a long plotted out. The point of contention that I have executed from is this this green zone here. I've executed from about 190.700, which is the bottom of this imbalance. If I got into the lower time frames, you'll see it's more accurate than using this whole big one. Furthermore, you can see this zone has been interacted with as a liquidity pivot, resistance for all these candles, support for all these candles, support in the past, etc. So this is an area of contention for us. We spiked into this zone, we showed some acceptance and rallied back up, and I've entered on the momentum. For this trade to be truly valid, what I would like to see is this zone here that we really contended with for most of the Asian session being flipped. So if we could actually see something like getting above here, retesting and holding on to this zone, then we should be able to see a sharp move to the upside. Okay, if I were to also bring up the MA convergence, you're going to see on this hourly basis we have the range throughout Asia and late into yesterday's New York session in confluence with bottom VWAP, in confluence with the moving average cluster. Okay, so if we can flip this zone into a form some type of support there, it is going to allow for additional re-entries from this 191.0 for what I believe will be a fast and sharp push to the upside on GBPJPY. So this area here, 191.0, all of this zone, we need to flip it. Once we get above there, we should be rallying to the upside. I'm going to be using the VWAP as guidance. So as you can see, top VWAP is in confluence with this target here, 192.800. That is this imbalance here in confluence with the high that we formed on Friday evening. In terms of additional targets, you're going to see this zone here in confluence with mid VWAP. What we've actually got here is this imbalance. Okay, tested into it on several candles, so we know there's some trap volume around here in confluence with the VWAP. We can use this here at 191.800 as our intermediary target for about 110 pips. But GJ is actually a pretty simple setup at this point. If you haven't got the optimized entries from all the way down here, you either want to be waiting for some type of valid retest and strength, or for a flip of this 191.200 zone. Okay, simple stuff on GJ, just using the factors of confluence together, reading the market as it comes, etc, etc. As shown on the higher time frame, though, we do have this gravitation to the 194 and above. So if we do show any type of strength up at this area, I will be looking to leave runners all the way into these highs and potentially above 300, potentially 400 pip move. That's how I'm seeing GJ. Buys are live. I've got a little update in the Discord. For those of you who are in the Discord, I will get additional, more detailed updates shortly hereafter. Moving on from GJ, we will take a look at Euro. So move this to the 30. On the 30-minute on Euro, you can see that we're just within this general trend. If we were to just clone this, bring it to the downside, you can see that we are expecting an essence of some type of channel. And if we were to eventually come down to test the previous week lows, we would just be respecting the structural channel. With that said, I don't tend to execute off that, just something to keep in mind. What I'm seeing on EURUSD is we have Monday's high up here. We also have this high that we formed today, Tuesday, in London. Both of these highs look clean to be taken in today's New York session. Okay, I would like to see New York retake control at least of this high, and potentially retake control of the high of the previous day. So with that in mind, I would look for longs. My point of execution is the confluence of our imbalance on the 30-minute basis, or imbalance that we formed in Asia, in confluence with our Fibonacci pocket. Okay, our fib pocket. If we come into this zone, we've tapped into it once during London, which is pre-New York. Early into New York, if we could tap into here again, show a bit further of a drive, and then show some relative strength, then we can look to enter on the momentum as we're pushing out of this zone. The 1.130 to 1.13050. If we get between, show strength between this zone early into New York, executing buys would be a sensible play. I'll be looking, as I mentioned, for today's London high and for yesterday's New York high as our targets. Monday's high and Tuesday's high. Pretty simple. If we are going to trade above Monday's high and show continuation, then previous Friday high is where we can look to trade into next on Euro. In terms of what could be like the better trades, especially in terms of risk reward, for the week we could be looking for this reversion back to the downside afterwards. My question I'm asking is more than anything, am I going to be executing from this zone here, from Monday's high 1.13650, or would I execute from the previous Friday's high at 1.13800? Either or, I believe. Irregardless, I believe that a lot of these lows are primed to be taken, okay? Especially this last Thursday low, the previous week low. I would like to see a run into there. Whether we're taking it from Monday's high or we're taking it from Friday's high, that's yet to be seen. An alternate scenario that I would also like to consider, in the event that our fib zone doesn't hold, we are most likely going to retrace all the way into these lows, and at that point, once we've retraced into these lows, it's likely we see a full run into the previous week's lows at 1.12650. So I would like to keep that in mind. If the fib zone doesn't hold, then I'm not going to be preemptive on longs. I'll actually wait for a full run of the previous week lows on Euro. Simple stuff, simple stuff. EURUSD, lots of scenarios to consider, but I'm really looking for buys today in the New York session if the fib zone holds. If it doesn't hold, I'm just going to hold off and reevaluate the chart. With that said, I have the real points of contention, the points of interest, and potential points of execution mapped out. So for at least for the next 24 to 48 hours, I should have something actionable in EURUSD based off the levels drawn on the screen. That's what I see on Euro right now. If we are to move on, we can go GBPUSD. So what are you actually seeing on GBPUSD right now? If I just plot it like this so it makes more sense to you, was this sell that we had taken yesterday in the New York session. I can pull up the Discord and show this one though. GU, you can see that just prior to the New York Open yesterday, we took the pound-dollar sells. I had already pre-planned them out in London. Applying appropriate risk, we had a valid deviation of Friday's high, and really I broke down the theory of how I were taking the trade in the market outlook, okay, for the Discord members. But the idea of the trade is that we had swept the previous Friday high, 1, 2, 3 candles taken out in the doing so. If you see, I'll come on here. In doing so, when taking out these highs here, we actually swept the immediate term highs as well, which would be on a 1 minute or 5 minute basis, chart wise, time frame wise, which means we had taken out the immediate sellers and the previous week sellers. So we executed these on pound dollar, very fast run, all downside candles, rolled stops into break even. Then we got another run into the volume imbalance into the previous lows that we formed in London, and eventually we tapped into our full target practically to perfection. I think it was about 0.5 pips, 0.6 pips off of the target, something like that. So really clean work on GBPUSD. We've since reverted back up to these highs, but I'm out of my position, so I am going to be looking for something new. So if I were to plot this from scratch, you're going to see we have this imbalance formed in Asia. Down here at 1.32800, sorry. And if I were to move this over to this high here, this is going to be the Monday's highs. So in terms of potential execution, what do we have here? We have Monday's highs, we have Tuesday's London highs, okay? Tuesday London specifically has not breached, they have not been able to breach yesterday's New York high. What New York potentially will do today is look to take control of the high, okay? They're going to take out the London sellers, take control of the high of the day, and if we see this deviation, this reversion back below again, and hold beneath it, then we can look to execute sells into this imbalance. Okay, that would be in our target one, the 1.32800. So the way this would look if I were to plot it out would be like so. Something like that on GBPUSD. If we're able to print a valid deviation of the previous day's highs, we have New York control the highs that would have taken out London. They would control the high of the day, high of the week, and then we can look for reversion to the downside. This imbalance would be your initial targets, but in terms of further targets, we're now seeing 1, 2, 3 tests of this low. All 3 of them have held. If we're going to come back into this low, a lot of buyers from early this week and late last week are going to have their stop losses resting below here, because there's now 3 drives into this low. A run into these lows is going to cause a cascade, so we wouldn't just TP this area, we would run into so many stop losses, it would quickly provide much more selling pressure and provide a further move into the next low at 1.32340, which is the low from 22nd of April. Okay, so on GBPUSD, if we breach these lows, we can look for this extension for around 100 pips into 1.32340, which should be really good stuff in terms of risk to reward. Alternatively, what I also have my eye on, and I will definitely be cautious of, if I move up to the hourly and bring a VWAP up from these highs, you can see that we're interacting with the VWAP at the moment, which we could use as a baseline for our entry in these cells. Okay, what I would like to mention though is we have this high here, that if we get above the VWAP and hold on to this area, then we could see a sharp move into the 1.13 or 1.33770, okay, which is this imbalance on the hourly and 30-minute in confluence with our top VWAP. Reason being is above this 1.33450, there's not much in the form of resistance, there's not much in the form of resistance to price, okay? If price does breach this zone, hold on to this area, use VWAP as a support in this case, then we can see a sharp move into the top end of the VWAP, and you can either look to execute impulse longs, which will look like this. Impulse longs, which will look something like that. Or you can wait till price comes into this zone and you can look to execute potentially tomorrow some type of sell setup from this region all the way back down to this zone here, and then potentially, as we mentioned, breach of these equal lows all the way for a cascade to the 1.32340. GBPUSD, so I need to be careful of executing these sells because the potential gravitation to this zone above. Alright, my way that I would approach something like this, if in the event where there is a valid sell setup presented, let me just clean this up. In the event there is a valid sell setup given what presented where we spike these, we perform the deviation and look to execute on this momentum here, I will make sure that I do have a tight stop loss, because once price gets like above the 1.3350, it's going to have a really fast move, okay, up to the next zone. So I don't need my stop loss here, I don't need my stop loss here, I'll keep it tight above that, whatever highs it forms, 20-ish pips, and execute the sells like so, okay. Risk management is key, and it's something you want to keep in mind. That's how I see GU, EU, and GJ. Looking at BTC, so again, if I pull up the Discord here first, you'll see on BTC I executed some buys yesterday using a similar setup where we tested into our zone here once and then again a retest into the fib zone, and we had a run into our first target, and eventually, as you can see, we've reverted back to the downside and moved into our break even. There is now that we've breached and formed a new high, there is a similar setup presenting where we are respecting the fib zone once, twice. What we could potentially see on Bitcoin is similar to some of the other pairs, is off the open. We could see a run further into this zone, further into the fib zone, maybe into 93,800 off the New York Open, and then if we show some impulsive strength, we can look to execute these buys on Bitcoin back into the highs that we formed Monday night and potentially into this zone here, the highs that we formed Sunday night. What I'd like to mention is above these Monday highs, you're going to see that we have this imbalance of price on Bitcoin about the 93, 300, 95, 300, 95, 400 zone. If I were to execute these sells, these buys, and we run to the upside, the way I would look to exit this position is a scaling exit. But once we breach these highs, I would look to slowly exit position all the way between this zone here, but in this tiny little range, 95,200 to 95,700. And I would leave runners on the table for a potential move towards the top VWAP at 96,460. These highs up here. Simple stuff on Bitcoin. What I would like to keep in mind is that this is a lower EV setup than some of the other ones. While I'm keeping an eye on this, and if the relevant dynamics present, I will execute. This is not my highest probability trade out of the pairs I've covered today. So with that in mind, you want to be cautious with executing this exact position on Bitcoin. An alternate scenario is that we would take a full run of these lows, okay, and then reclaim and look for the reversion back into VWAP, okay. It depends on how New York is going to react on the open, which is in about 2 hours from now. With that in mind, I'm going to get to the gym, get a workout in, and make sure I'm back on the computer for the New York Open. For those of you who are in the Discord, I will be getting some trades, some ideas and whatnot out in the Discord, probably both before and after I go to the gym, but I'll be locked in for the New York Open. I suggest you guys do the same. A myriad of setups and potential ideas that you can execute from. I am live on the GJ setup, on the GJ trade. Other than that, I'm stalking price on Euro and on GU and on Bitcoin. That's all from me for the time being. I appreciate all of you being there, like and subscribe and all that stuff there. Use appropriate risk. Take care, guys. Cheers.